محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Inshallah, as we said, we will continue with the matters of the hereafter, and we have covered the signs of the Day of Judgment. And inshallah tonight, before we talk about Al-Qabr and the grave and the Barzakh, which is the transition state between this life and the hereafter, something that the ulama, they talked about, they stressed, is the ending of one's life. The ending of one's life. And the ending of one's life is a very significant moment that every one of us will face. There is no way out of this. This is the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He created us, and we reach the age where we are responsible for our actions. So the matter is either Jannah or the hellfire. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. And He subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most wise. And it's part of the honor to the son of Adam, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ وَحَمَلْنَاهُمْ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ وَرَزَقْنَاهُمْ مِنَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ. As the ayah says, we have honored the son of Adam. So part of this honor, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. And He had decreed for us our creation and our rizq and provisions 50,000 years before we are created. And everything we do is written for us. This is an honor. When the believers, they think of this, that means we have been mentioned, right? Each and every one of us, with his provisions and what he's going to eat and what's going to happen to him, and whether he is from the people of Jannah or from the people of the hellfire. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the ability to make decisions, and as a result of that, He will reward whoever He will subhanahu wa ta'ala, and punish by His justice whoever He will. So the matter is a very serious one. And many times, most of the time, human beings are in a state of forgetfulness when it comes to the ending of their life, not the hereafter. Something that can be very close, and the hereafter is very close. But the last moments of one's life can be very, very close, more than what we think it is. Most of the people, those who die, they never thought that they would die in that instant. Even those who have chronic diseases or whatever, death comes all of a sudden, because it's something that nobody have ever experienced before. And only the believers will be in state of happiness and joy when the angels of death will come to them. But the point is the ending of one's life, as they say, al-ibra bil-khawatim, which means the matter is according to how it ends. And we kind of talked about that briefly before, but this is a subject, again, as the ulama, they talk about it, and there are many things, whether it's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, or from the early generations of Islam, and how their life ended, and how the disbelievers, their life ended. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man kana akhiru kalamihi la ilaha illallah, dakhala al-jannah." Whoever his last words is la ilaha illallah, he will enter Jannah. So the last words, the last actions, it's something very important to die on the tawheed. We start our life with the tawheed, and the end of one's life should be on the tawheed. And in between, a person is perfecting his tawheed. A person embraces Islam, he is on the tawheed. He perfects his tawheed, he continues to be on the state of repentance, and by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah guides whomever He will subhanahu wa ta'ala. For the person to die on the tawheed, this is a great ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the greatest ni'mah, to die on la ilaha illallah. So the ending of one's life is a very significant one, again because of al-ibra wal-khawatim. There's a hadith, the hadith of Sahl ibn Sa'd radiyallahu anhu, and this is in Bukhari and Muslim, where a man was from among the Muslims, with the Muslims. He was someone that fighting with the Prophet ﷺ, and he was very fierce in his fighting, and they so amazed of how strong he is and how brave he is. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Man ahabba an yanzura ila rajulin min ahli an-nar falyanzur ila hadha." He said, whoever wants to look at a man from the people of the hellfire, he should look at this man. So one of the people, he followed him. and they were so surprised, how can he be from the people of the hellfire when he is giving his life for the sake of Allah, but this is how it appears to them. And he's fighting with the Prophet ﷺ on one of the bravest ones. So one followed him, and he found him that he is min ashad al-nasi al-mushrikeen. He is from the most strongest one against the mushrikeen, the disbelievers. حتى جرح فاستعجل الموت. And when he got wounded, he was in haste, he killed himself. And what he did, as the hadith says, he put ذبابة سيفه بين ثدييه. He put the tip of his sword in the middle of his chest, and he pressed on it till it came out from his back when he was wounded. He killed himself because he didn't want to go through the wound and the pain of the wound. So the man, when he saw this, he came to the Prophet ﷺ quickly and he said, أشهد أنك رسول الله. I bear witness that you are the messenger of Allah. He said, وما ذاك, why are you saying that? He said, قلت لفلان من أحب أن ينظر إلى رجل من أهل النار فلينظر إليه. He said, you said that whoever wants to look at someone from the people of the hellfire, look at so and so. And he was the best of us when it comes to fighting the enemies and so on. So I followed him, and this is what happened. Then the Prophet ﷺ said the hadith that when we hear it, it brings hope and fear at the same time. But again, we have to always think of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إن العبد لا يعمل عمل أهل النار وإنه من أهل الجنة ويعمل عمل أهل الجنة وإنه من أهل النار وإنما الأعمال بالخواتيم. The Prophet ﷺ said that al-abd, the slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will do the deeds of the people of the fire, but he is from the people of Jannah. And he will do the deeds of the people of Jannah, and he is from the people of the hellfire. Then the Prophet ﷺ explained how وَإِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالْخَوَاتِيمِ. Indeed, the deeds are by the khawatim, by the seal of it, by the end of it. So this is what really matters. Does that mean a person can just forget about the matter till the last moment of his life and he make a decision because he knows when he's going to end his life, and then to say La ilaha illallah? It is not like this. It is the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that whoever lives on something, his life will end on the same thing. This is by the mercy of Allah and the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whoever dies on something, he will be resurrected on the same thing. But there are exceptions, right? As the case as we heard, or the opposite of it. But the norm is, and this is one of the most important means to have a good ending, is al-istiqamah, to be steadfast on the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, and the same hadith that we heard, there's many narrations to it. And that's why also from the dua of the Prophet ﷺ, he used to say from his dua, alayhi salatu wassalam, authentic narration, Allahumma ya waliya al-Islami wa ahli, massikni al-Islam hatta alqaka alayhi. O Allah, the wali al-Islam, the owner of Islam, the Rabb of, the one that the Islam came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, massikni al-Islam, make me hold fast to al-Islam, hatta alqaka alayhi, till I meet you on it. So this is the dua of the Prophet ﷺ. That means the matter is not just a person got it and that's it. No, there's actions needs to be done. Till the last moment of one's life, he is holding fast, doing actions to keep oneself steadfast. And the most frequent dua of the Prophet ﷺ, as we know, Allahumma muqallib al-qulub thabbit qalbi ala dinik. O Allah, the changer of the hearts, make my heart steadfast on your religion. And this is one of the things that when you read in the stories of Salaf, Ridwanullahi alayhim, this is something that they feared the most. So they would keep them always steadfast and doing the good deeds. Their hearts are attached to the last moments of one's life. And they did not fear their sins more than they feared these moments, when the person is in his weakest position. And that's why the only ones that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them steadfast are the believers. So it's not your ability or one's ability or one's remembrance of things, right? It's a weak point, a very weak point that a person is in. It's not like when a person is awake and see things and he can say things and whatever he say can be different than what's in his heart. Like, that's one of the reasons also. One of the means to die on a good ending is to have a sidq, to always be truthful. What's in the heart is what's on the tongue. and so on. Because a person, while he's healthy and during his life, he can say many things without filtering this from his heart, if it's correct to say that, right? But when at the moment of death, what's in the heart will come out. So if the heart is filth and a person was not purifying it, right, it will be in state of forgetfulness then, or a person might die in the state of kufr or a'yadu billah. So it's not something to make the person terrified, but at the same time we have to have the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the healthy fear that keeps the person always steadfast on the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala till the last moment of one's life. And as the hadith reported by Al-Hakim and others, and Sheikh Ibrahim rahimahullah authenticated it, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man mata ala shay'in ba'athahu Allahu alayh." Whoever dies on something, Allah will make him resurrected on the same thing. So whoever dies on a sin, he will be resurrected with the same sin. Whoever dies with mudmin khamr, addicted to alcohol and intoxications, he will be resurrected with a glass of wine in his hand, as some of the hadith mentioned that. Whoever dies backbiting, slandering others, he will be resurrected with his tongue extended to his chest, looking in a very ugly way, right? And whoever dies in the state of al-haram al-hajj, he will be resurrected mulabbiyan, in the state of talbiyah, and the martyrs, they will be resurrected with their blood being spilling, right? With the smell of musk, and the color is the color of the blood, and so on. So according how a person dies, he will be resurrected. So the last moments of one's life, it's something extremely important. It saves, as Al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he put it in a beautiful statement. He said that the last moments of one's life, تحفظ ذخيرة العمر, which means protect. Dhakhira, usually this word is used more in the context of ammunition, right? So the last moments of one's life saves all the lifelong ammunition that you have been collecting and working and so on. The last moments will protect all of this, right? So this is such an important one. The ulama, they talk about what are the means, asbab, husn al-khatima and su al-khatima. What are the means for a person to have a good ending of one's life, since we're talking about the hereafter, for the person to reach his destination at matters of goodness and so on. Very briefly, and if any one of you heard it before, this can be just a reminder, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us benefit. Not in a particular order, but the most important one, of course, is al-istiqamah, is to be steadfast. Which, since we were talking about the karamat, or the miracles and so on of the righteous people, and as we said, as the statement that is very beautiful, the best karama ever is al-istiqamah. Istiqamah a'zam karama, أو خير من ألف karama. People, they seek karamat, they seek some supernatural things to happen to them during their life of being righteous and believers and so on. They want to see dreams, they want to see things are made easy for them during their life because they're believers. They want things to happen to them and so on. But the best karama ever, the best, if it's correct to say miracle, is when a person is steadfast on the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the midst of all of the temptations and the means that take the person away from al-istiqamah. Istiqamah needs a series by itself for us to get to know what it is. Istiqamah is a salat al-mustaqim, the straight path. It's not just one action here or there. It's istiqamah from going right or left. It's the straight path, the way of the Prophet ﷺ, to be away from shirk, to be on tawheed, to be away from bid'ah, to be on the sunnah, to be away from following the desires in a sinful way, to be following the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so on. So this is a lifetime way of life, and this is mentioned in the Quran in many verses, or few verses, in الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا, those who say our Lord is Allah, and then they had this istiqamah, تَتَنَزَّلُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ أَيْ عِنْدَ مَوْتِهِمْ. And this is why it's one of the means of a good ending. Because the ayah says the angels will come down unto them at the moment of death. Those who said, Rabbuna Allah, our Lord is Allah, and then they had this istiqamah on the way of the Prophet ﷺ, the angels will come to them at the moment of death, أَلَّا تَخَافُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا, do not fear what's coming ahead, do not grieve of what you're leaving behind, وَأَبِشِرُوا بِالْجَنَّةِ الَّتِي كُنْتُمْ تُوعَدُونَ, and have the glad tidings of the Jannah that you have been promised. And at that moment the believers would never want to come back to this world anymore. So the most fearful moment, that when we hear it we're all concerned, about the end of one's life and death and so on, which is the most fearful moment for each and every one of us, becomes the most joyful one for the believers. And they want to go back to the life that we're holding very tied to it, and we want to stay, maybe you stay longer and so on, but for the believers, once the moment comes, they never want to come back, as the Prophet ﷺ stated that in the authentic hadith. And what is better than to go back to the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after given the glad tidings. So whenever a person has that fear, the mean is al-istiqamah. However, fear with al-istiqamah to be a stranger, or things are difficult, or this or that, you should remember that if, yes, you would work hard and be tired, as mentioned before, the statement of Sheikh Ibn Baz rahimahullah used to say, المؤمن يتعب كثيرا, more or less what he said. You know, the believer يتعب كثيرا, he works hard, so he gets tired, right? ولكنه يعيش كبيرا ويموت كبيرا. But he lives big, كبيرا, not physically big. You know what I'm trying to say with the translation? Meaning, someone that he lives a goodly life, a noble life. Why? Because he is a believer, and he would die the same way, an honorable one. So, but with the tiredness and so on, there is a sweetness to it. If a person is steadfast on the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, if we just talk about istiqamah, we can mention many things with this. It's the ubudiyyah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no shirk whatsoever, the tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has something to do with the speech and actions and what's in our hearts, always correcting ourselves to be on the straight path. As some of the ulama narrate some of the things from the early generations of Islam, when, as he says, لما احتضر أبو سفيان بن الحارث بن عبد المطلب, Abu Sufyan رضي الله عنه, when he was dying, he said, لا تبكوا علي فإني لم أتنظف بخطيئة منذ أسلمت, which means أو لم أتنظف, يعني لم أتلطخ. He said, do not weep on me, because I was never contaminated with any sin from the moment I became a Muslim. It refers to the matter of how the istiqamah and how steadfastness, and how the person was so eager always to repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to be steadfast. Anyway, and many incidents, of course, like that. So al-istiqamah is one thing that is important. Taqwa Allah azza wa jal, to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ حَقَّ تُقَاتِهِ وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ, which is something that we hear all the time, that the Prophet ﷺ used to say in his khutbah. You who believe, اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ حَقَّ تُقَاتِهِ, obey Allah the way He ought to be obeyed, and do not die except in the state of Islam. Relationship between the taqwa, the fear of Allah, and to be obedient to Allah, and to die in the state of Islam. So whoever wants to die in the state of Islam, it's not some form of ideas that a person is convinced of. Some people, they think of Islam as some ideas or some beliefs. So as long as the belief is in the heart, who would take it away from me? If a person believes that Islam is the truth, but he lives his life the way he likes, but when he talks about the deen, yes, this is the truth. So he has it as an idea or belief in his heart. He thinks that if he has it like this, he will die the same way. You know, the person has to have the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because he can be the smartest and the one that has really the true belief of the deen of Islam, and that to be taken away. Why? Because of the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So at the time of one's ending and sakarat al-maut, the stubbornness of death and the agonies that a person goes through, the way to be saved from this is to be among those who have taqwa. This is the most difficult moment, right? And the Prophet ﷺ, when he was dying, والسلام, he said, in the naughty sakarat, that death has sakarat. Sakarat, as they translate it, stubbornness, or things that are so difficult for the person, very difficult moments. They say that it's very difficult, that the person dying is not able even to say anything, because how severe the difficulty is. And imagine when a person is sick or tired because of a pain, Imagine the soul itself is taken out, coming out from the person. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for all of us. So at that moment, this is a difficult moment, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what did He say about the difficult moments or difficult situations and how to be saved from this? He said, وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ وَيَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِ يُسْرًا. Whoever fear Allah, whoever is dutiful to Allah, have the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will make ways out for him. He would make his matter easy for him. So when this is a difficult moment, Allah will make it easy. To make it easy for those who have the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So al-istiqama and the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we see how it's linked to the last moment of one's life. Also, as the ulama they say, which is also referred to some of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, حسن الظن بالله, to have good expectations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when a person is sick, when a person is about to die, to think good about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a person is in need of it at all times. And it's a healthy fear to make the person always obedient to Allah. But the last moments of one's life, fear would not benefit him, right? At that moment he would need to think good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah would forgive his sins, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have mercy on him. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to do that. As the authentic hadith in Tabarani and others, إِنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى يَقُولُ أَنَا عِنْدَ ظَنِّ عَبْدِي بِي إِنْ خَيْرًا فَخَيْرٌ وَإِنْ شَرًّا فَشَرٌ. I am according to the dhan, to the expectation of my slave. If it's good, then it's good. If you think good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that a person will be forgiven and so on, then he will be like that. And if it's evil, then it will be what you think. And the other narration, قال الله تعالى أنا عند ظن عبدي بي, the same thing, أنا عند ظن عبدي بي فليظن بي ما شاء. Let my slave think of me whatever he will. And the husn al-dhann, or the good expectations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the previous things that we talked about, they go hand in hand with this. So husn al-dhann, or good expectations of Allah, or to think good that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would fulfill His promise for who? For those who have taqwa, those who are steadfast. Allah promised who Jannah? He promised the believers. وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. And the many verses that talks about the promise of Allah, right? إِنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ حَقٌّ, that the promise of Allah is the truth. Did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promise the disbelievers Jannah in the Quran or in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu? No. Did He promise those who are in a state of forgetfulness and sins and so on? There is not even one ayah that promises the disbelievers or the sins or the sinners even. Although the sinners, some of them will be forgiven, and some of them, if they are punished, can then eventually enter Jannah, but they have nothing as far as the promise, right? So the promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the promise is for them to eventually enter Jannah, yes. But for the believers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised them. So whoever think good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you have to live the life of the believers, to think good, to do good deed and to think good, that Allah would accept your deed, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would accept your repentance when you repent to Allah. Some people, the shaitan comes to them, you committed so many sins in your life, there is no way your sin will be forgiven. Especially when a person repents and then he falls again into the same sin. And then repents and falls again to the same sin. Shaitan would say, who are you trying to trick? Right? You're evil. You are no good. No matter what you do, you're just filth. So that he would stay away. Right? This is all ways of shaitan. Person should continue to repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be truthful and take the means and so on. And to think good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of which, to think good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah can, He's the one that can give the steadfastness and give guidance and makes the person hate the sins and so on. And the Prophet ﷺ giving us a clear order, right? That means it's an act of worship that we have to fulfill. لا يموتن أحدكم إلا وهو يحسن الظن بالله. Don't you ever, this is basically, that's how it feels when you hear it. Don't you ever die. None of you shall die unless he has good expectations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Unless he's thinking good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one that had bestowed His favor upon the believers and guided them and provided for them, He subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that is capable of all things. So a person should not die unless he is in that state after he's been steadfast and obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What if a person lived all of his life in sins and forgetfulness and now he's at the last moments of his life? Should he think evil of them because of his actions? If he's still alive, he's still breathing, right? There's a chance. A person should not rely on this because Allah knows best, and a person has to be honest and truthful with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it doesn't matter. And a person can save himself at all times. So when the tawbah comes, a person should repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and always. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, Ibn al-Jawzi rahimahullah, he said, فَلْيَجْعَلْ الْمَرِيضُ حُسْنَ الظَّنِّ بِاللَّهِ شِعَارَهُ وَدِثَارَهُ. Meaning that when a person is sick, he should think good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make it like when you have a jacket, the lining of it and the outside of it. That means you're covered with the husn al-dhann. When a person is sick, it's easy to complain. Oh, this happened to me and I'm feeling this and I'm feeling that. That can bring, when the person is going through difficult times, right, can bring some means of the opposite of this. But when a person is always thinking good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would reward him. Anas radiallahu anhu, and this is a sound narration in Sunan Ibn Majah, and Sheikh Ibrahim rahimahullah, he authenticated it, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam entered on a young man when he was dying. And he said, كيف تجدك? How do you find yourself? He said, أرجو الله وأخاف ذنوبي. I hope for the rewards from Allah and I fear my sins. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يجتمعان في قلب عبد في مثل هذا الموطن إلا أعطاه الله ما يرجوه وأمنه مما يخاف. He said عليه الصلاة والسلام لا يجتمعان. These two things, if they are both present in the heart of the Muslim at this moment, at the last moments of his life, unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give him what he hoped for, and he would secure him from what he is afraid of. So he's hoping for the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he is fearing his sins, which is a normal thing. But the fear in a way that it does not make the person have bad expectations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we hear these glad tidings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah would secure him from what he fears from, and he would give him what he is hoping. And they used to, the early generations of Islam, they used to, whenever they are in the moment of their death, they would remind them of their good things, right? That you did this and you did this. For them to be, this is the last thoughts in this life, so that they would think good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not that a person is dying and someone comes to him and tell him, you just sinned so much in your life. You have just been the worst individual ever. That makes the person, that means I'm in the hellfire, so he would have these bad expectations of Allah. And plus there's no point of saying these types of things to someone that is about to die. Or some of them, they would talk about the rukhas or the breaks in the deen of Islam, so that they would have good expectations and so on. So this is another lengthy subject. Also, one of which is as-sidq, or to be truthful. Because again, at the moments of weakness, the tongue is not really acting alone, as it is when a person at times of ease and health and so on. The tongue can act on its own, right? But the heart can be hidden, right? But at the moment of weakness or at the moment of death, what's in the heart comes out. So that's why whoever lived with truthfulness throughout his life, the truthfulness will continue to be at the moment of death. And truthfulness means that what's in the heart is what's on the tongue, is what's on the different parts of the body, all in the same way. There's no difference whatsoever. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَكُونُوا مَعَ الصَّادِقِينَ. Or who believe, fear Allah, be dutiful to Allah, and always be with the صادقين. And there are many incidences of that, and the man that the Prophet ﷺ said, إِن تَصْدُقِ اللَّهَ يَصْدُقْ. When he came and he asked the Prophet ﷺ, he just embraced Islam, and they had a booty of the war and they were distributing that. He came to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, مَعَلَى هَذَا اتَّبَعْتُكَ. I did not follow you for this, for this materialistic gain. He said, I followed you so that an arrow will come here and come out from here, and I die and I enter Jannah. So the Prophet ﷺ told him, if you are truthful in this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would reward you, give you what you are truthful with. And short while after that, the man was brought to the Prophet ﷺ, and the arrow entered from the same spot that he pointed. So Allah and the Prophet ﷺ said to him, or to the Sahaba radiallahu anhum about him, that he was truthful with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and as a result of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was truthful with him, gave him what he asked for. And actually, if you ponder over, وَأَتَاكُم مِّن كُلِّ مَا سَأَلْتُمُوهُ, it never fails. Which means, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you from everything you ask Him for. This is true. If a person asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for anything, he will be given what he asked for. A person will say, well, I ask for millions and billions. Right? This is usually in the context of what is good. So if a person is honest and truthful in asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anything that is goodness for one's purpose of life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give it if he's truthful. And one of which, if wealth is something good for him that would help him in matters of his religion, he will be given. So it never fails, and that's why a person has to be truthful with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the truthful ones are not the ones that are asking for the billions when they're not fulfilling the purpose of their life. This is not truthfulness, right? This is something else. The truthfulness is when the person knows what he is created for, and his heart is having the belief in La ilaha illallah and Muhammadur Rasulullah, and he acts accordingly, and he truly wants from this life what would keep him fulfilling that purpose and obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give him accordingly in this life and in the hereafter. Also, one of these things, because of the time, is one of the means, as the ulama they say, to protect oneself from the bad ending is to feel the bad ending, to be always concerned of this, not to be forgetful at the last moment of one's life, especially that the matter comes when we have no idea whatsoever when it's going to come, right? And this is something that we have been warned of. Person thinking good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he would live long till he make good deeds and he makes hajj and so on and so forth. This is not good thinking of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we have been warned clearly that death comes anytime, and we're supposed to be prepared for it at all times. So as a result of that, having the hearts always attached that this can happen anytime, a person will be always ready. But it's not a good sign for a person to say I'm ready. So we have to always feel that we're deficient. We need to do more. We need to act more. We need to constantly repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why when we talk about su'ul khatimah, the bad ending, the things that are means to the bad ending, we should fear these things so that we stay away from it. Shirk, bid'ah, right? Sins. When a person doesn't care, shirk is something that is only for the people of Quraysh. This is definitely a dangerous thing. Ibrahim alayhi salam said, وَجُنُوبِنِي وَبَنِيَّ أَن نَعْبُدَ الْأَصْنَامِ, making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, prevent me, protect me and my offspring, from worshipping al-asnam, the idols that he broke alayhi salam, right? How strong his iman was, and still would ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, protect me and my offsprings from worshipping idols. Who among us have ever said a dua like this? Oh Allah, protect me from these matters of disbelief, or worshipping idols, or worshipping Isa alayhi salam, or right? And a person can say, this is silly things, how can a person believe? It is. But when it comes to the guidance, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And a person should not really like himself so much that he's very smart. He should rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, put his trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to fear. It's a good fear. And it's not like a weak iman, no, it's a good fear, so a person would stay away from it. And stay away from the innovations of the deen and so on, delaying tawbah, right? Not now, after I finish building this, or after this degree, or after this project, or after, and it never ends, right? And it grows with the person actually. So it's something that has to be done immediately. Once a person postpones it for another day, this is a dangerous thing. Plus it needs another sin that needs a person to be repented from. And the things that we said, the opposite of it. Instead of istiqamah, a person living his life like this. One day like this, one day like that. Right? 1 month is good, 1 month is down, 1 month is up, 1 month is this. There's no, and it's the mercy of Allah that He made the deen and the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it so easy for the Muslim to have istiqamah. the pillars of Islam, the salawat al-khams, the 5 daily salat, the istiqamah of making sure that it's in the masjid, the istiqamah, the consistency in doing the good deeds and so on. You would find the system of the deen of Islam helps the person always to have this consistency, and it's, again, as we said, it's usually difficult in the beginning, but then after that it becomes the norm of the life of the Muslim, with even the optional acts of worship and so on. So this is basically some of these signs. In 5 minutes, inshallah ta'ala, there are some signs where it came in some of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that signs of good ending. That when you see some of these signs on someone dying, it's a sign. You cannot guarantee, you cannot say this man is in Jannah because he died in this way or that way. Allah knows best, right? And also the signs of bad ending, we cannot say that this person is in the hellfire because he had the signs of the bad ending. Allah knows best. But it's only signs, right? So if it's a good sign, it's a good thing for a person to say after a person passed away. But if it's a bad sign, there's no need for a person to say it and to conceal the fault of another Muslim and so on. So there are some of these briefly, is to say the Shahada before one's death. If a person was guided to say the Shahada, then this was the last thing of one's life, and there are many situations and narrations of this. This is one of the signs. The Prophet ﷺ said in the authentic hadith, reported by Imam Ahmad and others, that the mu'min, مَوْتُ الْمُؤْمِنِ بِعَرَقِ الْجَبِينِ, that the death of the mu'min is with the sweat on his forehead. So one of the good signs, when the believers are dying, you would find sweat on their forehead. This is by the statement of the Prophet ﷺ. There's also the hadith in Muslim, Imam Ahmad and others, مَا مِن مُسْلِمٍ يَمُوتُ يَوْمَ الْجُمُعَةِ أَوْ لَيْلَةَ الْجُمُعَةِ إِلَّا وَقَاهُ اللَّهُ فِتْنَةَ الْقَبْرِ. There is no Muslim that would die on the day of Jumu'ah or the night of Jumu'ah, which is the night that comes before the day, unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect him from the punishment of the grave. This is sign. Does that mean that every person dies on Jumu'ah and so on? No, it's a sign. That means if it's there, we hope good. If it's not there, that means he's not an evil person or anything, right? So if a person died without any signs whatsoever, he can be in the highest level or the highest levels of Jannah. To die as a martyr, as the ayat and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and the great reward for this, and to die the different types of death, as it's mentioned also in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, to die in a plague, as the ta'un shahada likulli Muslim, as the Prophet ﷺ said, the epidemics. If a Muslim dies in epidemics, right, this is shahada for every Muslim, as the Prophet ﷺ said. And to die with a disease in one's al-batn. Al-batn is anything in the belly, right? Not necessarily the stomach, anything that is in the guts, right? Whether it's cancers, all these types of diseases. If a person dies with one of these diseases, the Prophet ﷺ said, وَمَنْ مَاتَ فِي الْبَطْنِ فَهُوَ شَهِيدٌ. Whoever dies with a disease on his stomach, he is shaheed. And to die drowning, or when a building collapses and head, as the Prophet ﷺ said, a woman dying while giving birth, this is also a shahada, as it's mentioned in the authentic hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. وَالْمَرْأَةُ يَقْتُلُهَا ولدها أو يجرها ولدها بسرره إلى الجنة, that her son will pull her from his umbilical cord to Jannah, right? Because she died while giving birth. And many of these types of shahada, whoever dies defending his wealth or defending his family when an attacker came and he dies in that course, he is among the people of Jannah, as the Prophet ﷺ said. Whoever dies in, as we said, drowning, and whoever even is eaten by a lion or something, right? This is shahada for the believers, as it's one of the narrations of the Prophet ﷺ, that whoever the sabra or the lion ate him, killed him, he is from those who are. This is different levels of shahada. These martyrs, they are to be washed and to be prayed over and so on. The shaheed in the battlefield is different, but they reach the levels as the Prophet ﷺ said. And the hadith, من قام إلى إمام جائر فأمره بمعروف فقتله. Whoever stood up for a leader that is unjust in front of him, and he enjoined good for him, and ordered him to do good, and as a result of that he was killed, he is a martyr. And whoever seek martyrdom, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give him the level of martyrdom as long as it's done truthfully, as the Prophet ﷺ said, even if he dies on his bed. And one of the amazing ones, as we heard the hadith, is when a person is calling and holding fast to the sunnah at the times of fitna, and he dies in that state. This is a good sign. As the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ مِنْ وَرَائِكُمْ زَمَانَ صَبْرٍ لِلْمُتَمَسِّكِ فِيهِ أَجْرُ خَمْسِينَ شَهِيدًا مِنْكُمْ. One of the narrations, shahidan. Right? Whoever, he says, from behind you, time would come, zaman sabr, time of sabr, of extreme patience. Whoever holds in these times on his religion, he will get the reward of 50 among you, meaning the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. In another narration, 50 martyr among you. Right? So, as a result of holding fast to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one last thing, although there are many, is to die on a good deed. And there are many hadith of this. And there's one of these narrations, and this is the last hadith that we mentioned, inshallah. There are many of them, but the hadith in Muslim Ahmad and others, إِذَا أَرَادَ اللَّهُ بِعَبْدٍ خَيْرًا عَسَلَهُ. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants goodness from a person, He would give him something good, right? And they asked him, what is عسلة? قال يفتح له عملا صالحا قبل موته ثم يقبض عليه. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in another narration, استعمله, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will use a person as a result of a good sign. And they asked him, what does that mean? The Prophet ﷺ said, he will be given, يفتح له, or opened for him a good deed, a righteous deed before he dies, and then he dies on it. Right? He dies while doing this good deed. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who have a good ending and to give us istiqamah and guidance on the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we continue inshallah ta'ala next week for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.